The ocean is a scary place. I bring this story up all the time, but when I was a youngling, I was swimming in the ocean in water that you really couldn't see through because it was churned up, and something big ran into my leg, which I'm pretty sure my soul left my body at that point. Ever since that moment, anything that lives in the ocean can catch these hands on sight, and not just the ocean creatures, but the marine biologists and the whale watchers too. A group of people who likely feel like I do after this event are those associated with an Alzheimer's curing project. Weird segue, I know. In the events of Deep Blue Sea, a team is on the cutting edge of technology concerning curing mental degradation. See, it is naturally, horrifically, as you age, for brain tissue to begin having issues. Neural connections degrade, memory fades, acuity goes out the window, but the process is supposed to be slower, and with that can come adjustments. In those suffering from Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, it can come on rapidly, leading to this tissue critically losing function, which then you meet your end. It's absolutely horrible and as such should be stamped out with the most hatred possible by humanity. This team doing just that, they were using one of creation's oldest creatures, the shark, with their hope being to reactivate cells utilizing these similar proteins in the shark's brain that allows it to live as long as it does and also maintain brain function. Remember, the Greenland shark isn't a Christmas present, it's a 400-year commitment. But in order to collect enough of this protein, which at the time Alzheimer's appears to have been less understood as like what caused the neural degeneration, because it's really just not an issue of neurons not activating, they would have to make the shark brain larger, which presents its own issue. So what happens when you take a 45-foot man-eating ocean dweller and make it about as intelligent as a chimp? Facility hijinks ensue. So in today's episode, let's not just only talk about the neuronal effects of increasing a shark's brain, but theoretically why this protein was doing what it was doing to the human neurons and why amplifying a shark's intelligence is probably a bad idea. We kick off our story today with the knowledge that it's about sharks. So if you honestly think we are going to talk about the angler, as we approach a boat, we see a woman doing the most ridiculous thing possible. Who goes out into the ocean at night and just casually dangles their foot in the water? Bruh, if nothing else, a merman is going to pull you down and just eat your face or something. As something approaches the boat, we get these super, switched on, supposedly 20-somethings, attempting to get it on as the boat shakes. As wine falls into the water, the shark is about to break its 20-year sobriety. It starts going ham on the boat and then crashes through the middle of it. Scaring everyone, they do the sensible thing and then fall off the sides, because of course they do. As they are all about to be turned into shark bait, ooh-ha-ha. God. A man approaches and harpoons the thing, saving everyone's legs. They didn't see this boat approaching like way earlier somehow also. Very strange. Meanwhile, back on the second most horrible place on Earth, a random Californian city, Dr. McAllister has to meet with the board and talk about how they're trying to reactivate human brain cells to fix Alzheimer's. A worthy and noble cause. She's able to convince the board to kind of keep funding her project as she's super close to a breakthrough, which Russell, who's funded $200 million into this thing, good lord, agrees to accompany her to the testing facility to see it for himself. I mean, considering you are the guy funding the whole project, what are they going to say? No? Well, as we were about to find out, apparently nobody really likes having a job, and everyone except for the cook are a bunch of douche canoes to this dude who's literally paying their way. It's such a bizarre experience. As they approach a base built by the Navy in World War II, they have retrofitted it to deal with super intelligent sharks. Why sharks, you may be wondering? Why not something like a sloth or maybe even a chicken? Don't ask questions, dorks. It had to be man-eating beasts. It just had to be. That and the viability of sharks through things like their own genetic stability have always been, well, sort of fascinating to our species. Sharks, as we all know, are a type of fish. Fundamentally, their structuring hasn't really changed all that much in the last 450 million years. To put that into perspective, whales were land-dwelling animals 50 million years ago. And that means in the time that it took whales to completely and utterly change almost everything about their species, sharks had already existed 8 times their existence with very little change. The amount of time cannot even be comprehended by humanity. It's just numbers that you're hearing at this point. But sharks are strange because of the aforementioned genetic stability, which allows them to live extremely long lifespans, such as the Greenland shark living around 400 years. They also do not get solid tumors, unlike almost every other species on this rock, due to cancer-fighting elements within their cartilage. And just really, their ability to survive is otherworldly, except when coming across humanity, that is. Actually, when the movie Jaws came out, great whites started to be hunted like they were trying to make them extinct. Remember, while scary, and I do joke about them, the ocean is a shark's natural habitat. The water is no more shark-infested than a city would be human-infested. It's just where they live, and you should leave them alone. Something to remember is they still are fairly intelligent animals, and sharks like the lemon shark, for instance, will get jealous if you usually feed it and then choose to feed another shark, and it recognizes people who regularly interact with it, which to that point, it seems like it can keep a schedule. It's pretty interesting to watch. They're like big cats of the sea that will tear you apart like a big cat if you activate their almonds, but if you're on good terms, it's quite friendly. Granted, I'm not going to test out that friendship, but others do. So as they load the shark into the water, it's one of the sharks that escaped the facility earlier. Hopefully they patch the fence, as surely it won't escape again. And Russell is then introduced to a team, which they meet the absolute real nerd, a marine biologist. Man, imagine not choosing the Chad talent tree of microbiology. As Russell looks down into the water, he spots a guy who immediately starts getting chased by one of the sharks. Could not pay me enough to get in that water. As Russell calls out, the guy can't hear him, obviously, because he's under the water, and I'm not sure why he would put himself into this kind of danger just to ride a shark to get a license plate. Like, that thing legitimately almost got your leg. Don't play it off like you knew what you were doing. This isn't swimming with dolphins. But he does remove the license plate, and now the shark is happy. This guy's name is Carter. Carter is introduced to Russell, and it goes over about as well as a fart in church. As Carter brings up Russell's money, like, what a zinger, bro. Oh, this guy's paying for this whole project? Well, maybe they like rich people too. Like, shut up. Like, the dude is signing your paycheck. I mean, okay, you aren't beholden to anything or anyone just because they pay you, but you're supposed to be convincing this guy to, like, keep funding the project, right? Approaching the Shark Tank, and not the one on TV, this is the actual smart Shark Tank, and that's also a joke because those investors are probably way smarter than me. There are 2 first-gen sharks and 1 second-gen shark. Although we all know the 3rd gen is superior. Shout out to my 4Runner fans out there. Any reason to flex a 28-year-old truck. The 2nd gen is likely more intelligent, moving back to the sharks though, because it's a combination of the 2 parents. But it's the weekend and everyone is headed home for the weekend because apparently a skeleton crew just runs this, even though they couldn't have had people stay because they're about to do something very important. Okay, bold move. Descending down into Aquatica with the marine biologist that is making it sound like a mental hospital apparently, is because they sent him with the marine biologist. There are 3 sub-levels: living quarters, wet lab, and engineering. As the doctor pulls some data, she checks for the projections for a shark's forebrain. Talking to Jim, she practices her tissue-taking procedures as he tells her they are 2 months ahead of schedule, everything's good. But they're behind schedule, so it's like they're behind schedule but ahead in their behind schedule. Doesn't make much sense. Over at Shark Wrangler headquarters, Russell talks to Carter and brings up his record of smuggling amongst other things. Again, the dude is signing your paychecks. Very strange interaction here. Carter says, well, I don't make waves. I'm just meeting the terms of my parole. Really selling it to the guy who's running this project. Over in the kitchen, my man LL Cool J is the cook, known as Preacher, as Bird talks mad smack to him the whole time. Carter then enters the cage system as they drop a tiger shark into the water. Sharks eating sharks. I mean, it works in nature because they don't really eat each other that much, but if it's anything like cows eating cows, prion disease may start to crop up. And you really gotta ask yourself, is there any actual reason that they are feeding these sharks, specifically sharks? Imagine creating a more intelligent animal, then feeding it basically its own species. It's sort of a bizarre thing to do for several reasons, mainly because cows are much cheaper for the project than like an entire shark, or maybe even get like some tuna. Literally anything else could have been eaten, but they intentionally feed the hyper-intelligent shark more sharks, which, considering a shark is an apex species, that means the mercury in its system would have built up more because of what it has to eat, which means you're just mainlining mercury into these hyper-intelligent sharks. Why are you doing that? So as the 3 super sharks approach, they tear it apart as it's snack time. Carter then watches for some reason, not really sure why, as the weather lady calls up to Dr. McAllister to surface level. As she heads outside, nobody is out there, and it's extra spooky, as they fire some flares and celebrate her birthday. Russell compliments Preacher on the food again as he just gets reamed for it. Like, this man can quite literally not catch a break for existing and supporting all these people's lives. Carter talks to McAllister about, I don't know, you know what, her name's Susan. We're gonna call her that because McAllister is just a long word. Susan is 1 syllable shorter. So he's making money moves on her, but she's obsessed with work, so he's probably not gonna land that one, as Janice and Jim tell Russell about what they're doing. They increase the forebrain of the female shark by 5 times so that it would release more protein, which should reactivate human neurons. Sounds like a good plan? No. But could it work? Also no. Then again, I'm not a marine biologist. She also says the human brain cells are stored in the forebrain of the shark, or she mentions this. It's interesting that we are learning about all these new areas where cells and fluids are stored, sort of like how pee is stored in our forebrain. Russell remarks how amazing it is that you could do all this without gene sequencing. Yes, very amazing. Actually, to the point that it would probably bring up some questions. So let's back up here a moment, because I want to highlight a few things that are amazing. This is clearly gene manipulation for several reasons. First and foremost, hormones will not increase a forebrain to 5 times its original size. But what is the forebrain of a shark? Much like the human brain, but smaller, the forebrain, specifically the anterior forebrain, is where the cerebral hemispheres are located. In sharks, their brains wouldn't be as complex as humanity's in terms of cerebrum mass to body mass, but that by no means makes them stupid, as it might be construed. This species has adapted a theorized 70% of their forebrain to its sense of smell, with the remaining 30% making up learning and memory. With this in mind, you can begin to understand why a drop of blood in an Olympic-sized pool can be picked up by a shark. Now, taking that and building it out 5 times its normal size would have several effects.
Yeah, this big brain time.
The idea behind a larger brain equaling larger intelligence isn't necessarily true. It's hypothesized, for instance, that humans are reaching a theoretical limit in terms of intelligence associated with brain size. After all, the brain is made of meat and fat, and within that meat and fat is our old pal anxiety triggered by the firing of neurons. Well, that and many other emotions, I guess, but I've had a lot of coffee this morning, so it's basically just anxiety. Anyhow, if our brains were to double in neurons, so to speak, that might do nothing more than slow down our functionality, making us less reactive to our environment, thus decreasing our fitness on this rock. If you increase brain size and not just double neuron density within our skulls, this would increase the distance firing to cover, which in turn may also provide no benefit to our functionality either. In fact, it is hypothesized essentially at this point that if humanity is to increase our intellect and really kind of make our processing better, I guess is the best way to put it, we will have to start installing machine parts, which they say the next step in human evolution is Homo cyborgus, which means we will be part machine. And then once your organic form is pretty much completely useless, you will become Homo machinus. Don't know if that's going to work. We'll probably nuke ourselves into oblivion beforehand and return to monkey, I guess. I don't know. But along with this, more tissue means more heat generation, which requires a person displacing that heat production so that they don't cook their own brain. The point is, our anxiety meat within our skull appears to be in perfect balance with our own functionality. So you have to ask yourself, with a shark, would increasing this mass by 5 times really make it more intelligent? I severely doubt it. If anything, it would increase communication time between areas of the brain, and it's entirely possible that, much like somebody who experiences autism can be overwhelmed by sensory information, these sharks may suffer the same fates, as now this species has to deal with 70% of this new forebrain that's over 5 times its original size, dealing with sense in the ocean. It may be a variable hell that this animal is in, but how do they accomplish this impressive brain growth? Well, we'll discuss that here in a moment when the cat is out of the bag. As they wrap up their depressing party, another depression is setting in. A tropical depression. Interesting. Is anybody else getting like Jurassic Park vibes from this? So as the bird keeps talking smack to Preacher, Susan goes to put on a key for some reason, as the storm the next day is mega moving in. Okay, so now it's Saturday. Like, I have to keep track of these days. Carter once again heads into the drink to go hang out with the super intelligent man-eating sharks, as he needs to retrieve one for the test. Heading into the surgical facility, they call out to Carter, who of course doesn't answer the first time. You gotta build that, I guess, mystique of Carter, because why would he answer his radio? Don't you know? Cool guys don't answer their radios on the first call. They snap at you on the second one because you're supposed to know they somehow survived in a shark-infested tank. See, the tank can be shark-infested because it's not natural to be in there. Swimming out, the sharks then synchronize their attack, but recognize what Carter's holding, a harpoon that will kind of sedate them. So they immediately put on their brakes and are able to swim backwards. Y'all made more intelligent sharks. Why are you surprised they're intelligent? Also, just because a shark's pectoral fin cannot bend upwards like a fish's, so they cannot swim backwards due to their physiology. This has nothing to do with intelligence. That's like asking a person, hey, bend your knee backwards when you walk because you're smart, right? Doesn't make a lot of sense. They also start breaking the cameras. This, however, does show that they're smart. So Carter leaves the safety of the catwalk now, like a Giga Chad, I guess, and they call out to him once again as he doesn't answer because he's kind of a jerk. A shark then gives chase to him, and as it goes after his air tank, he tranks it. Not smart enough, it would seem. Bringing it up on the platform, it's time to conduct shark surgery. With a few minor hiccups, such as this thing waking up, they are able to take a brain sample from the shark in its forebrain as they take the proteins out and are able to reactivate dormant human tissues. Which is odd again, because Alzheimer's, while the tissue does kind of deactivate and then it results in neuronal death, I don't know. This is like kind of strange. Like, what are they really looking for here? Let's discuss. I believe the first place we need to start is with the idea that, again, the shark's forebrain has grown 5 times its normal size. When gestating, the brain begins as a neuronal tube of sorts. The forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain with the spinal cord tacked on. The forebrain becomes a cerebrum, the midbrain becomes the areas such as the colliculi, the tegmentum, and the cerebral peduncles. The greatest hits. The hindbrain will become the cerebellum and the medulla. The same process exists within sharks when they are gestating as well. However, their forebrains are not very large in comparison to our own. During this critical stage, the forebrain development is regulated by transcription factors encoded by homeobox, BHLH, and fork head gene families. In a complex way of saying it, this is what facilitates the growth in our forebrains and makes us into the massive nerds that we are as a species. Here is where the gene manipulation comes in. While hormones can influence growth to make it 5 times the size that it should be without causing like an overgrowth of tissues in other areas of the brain, it's highly unlikely. So what do I think it is? I believe the human genome was sequenced into the gestating shark's brain specifically for several reasons. First, the brain growth is unprecedented in this species, but I find it extremely odd how just the forebrain appears to be afflicted in the Mako sharks to the degree that humans exhibit. But also I find it interesting how proteins are created within the shark brain that reactivate human tissue. There's not really a whole lot that would normally suggest that this shark protein should be compatible with human neuronal tissue unless this naturally occurring shark protein has now been altered in structure by utilizing human genomes, at least to kind of influence specifically how this shark protein is built. We know specifically in one area that proteins are utilized in the repair of cell structure and can help move molecules in and out of the cell, which will help to explain what's going on with Alzheimer's here in a moment. So everyone now is like mega jazzed about the fact that $200 million worth of funding has been basically paying off, and this guy is there to witness it personally. You know, life's work realized and all that. So as Jim walks by the shark, kind of like smoking a cigarette, if I remember correctly, the shark wakes back up and bites his arm off. Crikey, he's got an arm off. As everyone starts freaking out, Carter goes to grab the pellet spreader as Susan sends the shark below to save it from Carter. I mean, yeah, I guess you could just leave Jim over there bleeding out, but then again, that's a brachial artery severing. You need a tourniquet for that almost immediately. Also, why did Susan do that? You have the method that works, you know it works, it's literally completely replicable to you now, so why? My guess, she's got a bad case of bad brain. So they send a call out to the Coast Guard as a CGI helicopter approaches. Russell is the only one with some sense as he uses a belt to stop Jim from bleeding out. Opening the doors, well, it's almost like there's a giant storm out there. So no joke, the music from like joining the National Guard commercial starts playing as the helicopter gets there. So as they bring Jim up, hilariously the cable puller stops working because of course it does. But not only that, but there's no brake feature that stops it from unspooling into the shark tank below. Getting grabbed, the helicopter ends up going down as it's pulled by the sharks. Pretty sure the helicopter could like lift a shark out of the water is all I'm saying. But those things are supposed to be pretty strong. I mean, I guess, but so are search and rescue helicopters. But as it crashes, it goes into the watchtower, also taking out one of the other characters that we know nothing about. Okay, so looking it up, the helicopter cable has a 600-pound capacity, but can carry about 6,000 pounds with a cargo hook. So the cable should have snapped at around 600 pounds, whereas the actual helicopter can lift 6,000. The Mako shark is said to be around 45 feet long, or 13.7 meters, or about 18 bald eagles, though it doesn't look it, and comparably the whale shark, which is around that size, are known to be around 41,000 pounds, or 18,597 kilograms. So, you know, I guess the shark could probably pull a helicopter, but if the guy was like, oh, I don't want to crash into this thing, they could have snapped that cable like a twig just by trying to take off. So I'm not really sure how they got pulled into the watchtower. So as the team below watches this, they see the good Dr. Jim approach, held in mouth by the shark. It then throws Jim at the glass, allowing it to finally break into the facility. So after that explosion and the massive opening caused by the viewing window being broken, the whole facility has been structurally compromised, meaning that if they don't get out of there, they're all going to get ocean gated. They're able to get the door open before everything is flooded, but just barely so. Also, Janice does absolutely nothing to help to get the door closed. Marine biologist. It is at this point, Preacher feels the facility shake. They realize that the stairwell that they need to go through is flooded and there's probably sharks in there. The elevator has also been sealed because there's sharks in there, which is going to make things difficult getting past the sharks. Preacher begins to notice that the whole facility is starting to shake and leak as well. But they have a plan. Go down a level, take the sub, and then go up topside 2 at a time. With the sharks that clearly understand how acrylic glass works and how to bring down a helicopter. Very good. Even if the sub was in good condition, that thing would toss y'all around like a youngling in a gorilla enclosure. The shark is 41,000 pounds. Meanwhile, Preacher heads upstairs as he hears something. The shark growls were coming from inside the structure the whole time. Also, the sharks can growl now. Your guess is as good as mine as to why. So he gets flooded out as another group then approaches the door that is clearly being broken into. They think it's just lab equipment floating around. No, that's sharks. The bolts then start breaking as the group runs past because as soon as that thing opens, there's shark chow. Getting to the maintenance door, they open the hallway as it starts flooding, but they're able to start climbing as they get the door shut. The rest of the facility ain't doing so hot. Preacher now goes and looks for his bird as he calls out to him. Russell then goes to talk to Carter about how a shark broke through the door. Well, that seems a tad bit odd to Russell, doesn't it? Obviously, these things are more intelligent and much larger than normal. Russell claims that these things are after them and Russell kind of knows what's up. He now talks to Susan as she says their brains weren't large enough to house the protein complex in the quantities that they needed. They used gene therapy to increase their brain mass even more, with the unintended consequence of oopsie doopsies, we made them smarter. And apparently, there was some issue with them using gene therapy. I guess this was 1999. Peculiar considering what our species is messing with around nowadays. But why make it more intelligent and what genes were used? Based on the fact that these proteins need to be able to be capable of being utilized by humans' nervous system and not just the sharks, I believe personally that the human genome was used as a basis where certain genes were inserted, the ones actually aforementioned, to help the shark's brain grow larger, specifically the forebrain area. That is why when the proteins were also created by its own brain to help keep it functional, even well past several human generations, it would be able to be utilized by humans once taking it out of the shark brain. Almost like two halves make a whole, but both halves progenitors can use it. So what does this protein do though? As mentioned, the biggest issue with Alzheimer's is the result of death of the neuronal tissue, and this can disrupt memories and your very functioning the longer the disease goes unchecked, but even with medication, tragically, you can't stop it. So to this day, there are medications, but there's no way to completely prevent and stop the progression of Alzheimer's. Abnormal chemical changes seem to happen, causing tau proteins to detach from the microtubules and stick to other tau molecules, which then form threads and then tangles, strangling neurons and destroying them. In the beginning stages, disruption of the synaptic gap by these threads causes miscommunication issues, which leads to difficulty recalling things. Another issue comes from the amyloid plaques that build up that also destroy brain cells. These proteins will build in place and can completely disrupt any communication as the brain must adapt because this happens mostly in old age though. Neuroplasticity is not as prevalent and the process continues faster than the brain can adapt. A hypothesis has been raised that potentially the waste removal system of the brain and its decreasing effectiveness might have something to do with this as well. And you want to know the number one way that you can actually increase the effectiveness of your brain getting rid of waste like this? Exercise. That is it's kind of like, I wouldn't say the silver bullet, but it's like the bronze bullet to this, because a lot of people discount what exercise can actually do, but it has been shown to help with this. So if you have this in your family or you are concerned about dementia in general as you get older, one of the things you can do right now is start exercising, which will help this issue. And then hopefully by the time you get older, we will have a more effective way at permanently treating it. But it appears that this shark protein may influence the brain in several ways. But considering it's reactivating the neurons in general, this would indicate that the protein being used may in some ways reconnect nerves that the tau proteins have disrupted by detaching. Tau proteins are known to stabilize internal microtubules, and without them, neurotransmitters cannot get to where they need to go, which also disrupts communication. By fixing this issue, the neurons are effectively able to talk to one another again and then send the signals as necessary. But again, this appears to only be one issue fixed, as the plaques would still be building up and the tau proteins would continue forming the threads in the brain. Luckily, again, there are medications that actually came out this year that actually help remove the plaques in the brain, which is highly beneficial, and they didn't even have to use a mega intelligent shark to make that. Anyhow, when I was a kid, I used to look at scientists in movies and I was like, geez, what an idiot. How could you be so selfish? But as an adult, I'm like, she sort of has a point on wiping out degenerative brain disease. You just need better containment procedures. Maybe you could have done this on land or have a better tank. Carter is also upset along with the rest of the group as they blame her for doing her job, which is a bit of a huge bruh moment. I'm not saying Susan is innocent, but this appears to be a worthy cause, at least to me. So Preacher at this point is not having a good time. He finds a playboy for some courage as a shark is in the hallway with him. What a statement. Taking off, the shark gives chase or a swim, and also This is why I find it hard to believe these things are 45 feet long and 41,000 pounds. They fit so easily into hallways, it just doesn't make any sense. So as it's now in Preacher's territory, the kitchen, it turns into a game of keep away as the bird gets eaten. It traps him in the oven before he's able to break his way through to the one above and escape a warm fate. However, this is releasing gas into the room. As the group then gets to the sub, they realize it's broken and was broken specifically by the sharks. Meanwhile, back in Hell's Kitchen, Preacher escapes before blowing up the shark from the oven's gas leak, shaking the whole facility, damaging it further. As Tom starts freaking out, a fight almost ensues. Russell says something kind of stupid though. Water's murky. We might make it. Sorry, bro, but those lateral lines on a shark are based on movement, not sight. What are lateral lines? Glad you asked. The ocean, predictably, is a dangerous and rather large place. Don't even get me started on when it's night in the ocean. That is the most complete of nightmare fuel imaginable. Anyhow, the lateral lines of a shark are a line that runs along the entire length of its body. As it glides through the water, not only can it smell like a minuscule amount of blood, but it can also feel movement around it. There are a series of fluid-filled canals under its skin, along the sides of its body, and over the entirety of its head. These pores open up to the outside, with the body in direct contact with the water. Sensory tissue exists within these. It's sort of like you can compare it to hearing, right? You can determine where a sound is coming from. I mean, maybe I can't because I took amoxicillin for an ear infection and holy God is the tinnitus annoying. But when a vibration comes up from anywhere around them, it isn't just water gliding past them. Depending on where it is and where it hits next, this will tell the shark what direction a struggling animal is in, which hilariously, humans swim like an injured, struggling animal. These lateral lines can sense an animal about 820 feet away or a quarter of a kilometer. What a horrible, just creature of the depths. This line allows for the shark to pretty much feel anything that is not doing well around it, which again is usually humans and water. Russell then gives an inspiring speech, as everyone is starting to feel jazzed because Russell's prior experiences of getting out of I think it was an avalanche. He launches into a portion, yelling about how he's tired of all these sharks in this facility. And I wanted to say the real line, but you can't say that. And I know now somebody's going to post on iFunny about how my language is too clean. Well, you know what? I like paying bills. My bad. Actually, I don't like paying bills. They suck. So everybody starts clapping and saying Russell 2024, as then one of the sharks jumps out and drags him into the water, elephant seal style. We watch him get torn in half and eaten under the water. Tragic. Who's going to sign our paychecks now? So as they have a nice talk about what happens if 3,200 tons of water ends up in the rig, the support structures will collapse. They'll get mega crushed into a meat paste. Of course, there's a story floating around that full human meat suits were found after OceanGate, so that kind of brings into question a lot of things, unless it was something else that they found. Anyways, so they open up the pressure chamber and release it as the elevator then gets filled up. They're able to get the door closed as they ascend the elevator shaft. They find that the elevator is also burning. And a shark finds its way to open the door because somehow, of course, it can open a sealed hatch. That would honestly destroy the shark's face running into that thing is all I'm saying. It would knock it unconscious. No shot that it's able to get through a sealed hatch like that. Just saying. So as everyone struggles to literally climb a ladder, now they're all nerds, so I guess that makes sense. Carter goes up to the second floor, which is only partially flooded, so they open up that door to increase the air pressure. It'll raise the water to the second floor, but that's where it'll stop, rather than raising up the entire way through the elevator shaft. Everyone is being mega dorks again about watching rather than climbing, and also, they keep pretending like it's hard to climb a ladder. Bro, climb the ladder! But because they waited 3 years, the ladder breaks, probably from rusting through as so much time has passed, as Janice is then fallen into the water with the shark and she gets mega got. So they contemplate, well, we're going to meet our end now because we can't reach that elevator shaft as they hear another thumping noise. They think it's a shark, except it's no shark. It's the Rizzler, known as Preacher. Oh my God, I forgot I even wrote this. So they get pulled out of the elevator shaft of love as they now reach the third level. Preacher lets him know that the stairs are flooded, so we can't go that way, but they have an idea. Reactivate the bilge pumps and drain the stairwell. Well, that's an easy idea. They then search Jin's room for batteries as Carter patches up his wound with oil so that the sharks can't smell him, while Susan talks about how everything she's done, she couldn't have done without Carter. That's because he doesn't make waves. Get it? Because it's deep blue sea. So they split up into 2 teams, Preacher and Susan and Carter and Skoggs. Susan immediately abandons her team to go get the I guess the protein that she needs, which would make at least this whole thing somewhat worth it. While Carter goes to drain the stairwell, where, look at that, he runs back in the gym again. As Skog joins Carter, screaming like gigachads, they realize that one of the monitors is blocking the panel that they need. Meanwhile, Preacher launches into a monologue on the proper way to cook an omelet. But you want to know the greatest way to make scrambled eggs? Actually do this. Use a spoon to just barely stir up the eggs by breaking the yolk and then stirring it a little bit. Never use a fork to make eggs, as it makes them rubbery because it bruises the yolk. Also, kind of a similar thing with a spatula. Doesn't really work as well. A spoon is better. Getting the monitor moved, they start by draining the stairs while most definitely running out of air. As Skoggs goes to ascend, the shark then shows back up, taking him out. Which, what do you call a guy with no arms and no legs in the ocean? Bob. Carter goes up for air as Skoggs' legs twitch, which part of that needs to be blurred. That sucks, bro. As he goes to make a break for the door. Not Skoggs' legs, but Carter. The shark then takes the stairs down for some reason and somehow misses his attack. He's missed no attack, or this thing has missed no attack ever, but when it comes to Carter, he's got the plot armor, I suppose. Meanwhile, Susan has entered the water down to her lab. Carter emerges in a shaft where Preacher was as Susan gets to her lab. Susan gets there, she finds the whole thing is flooded. She's able to get the protein complex, though one of the mannequins really scares the crap out of her, as then the real shark shows up. This thing does not have a dorsal fin that suggests it's 45 feet in length, is all I'm saying. Launching an attack, she's able to get out of the water, but drops the protein complex. But she has a great idea. Pull the electricity out of the junction box and then strip, for insulation. Standing on her wetsuit, the shark then jumps to attack at her as she deep fries that thing extra crispy with electricity. Remember, they're tough. They ain't invincible. The team now reconnects, knowing that there's only one left. Using the fire extinguisher as a distraction, they swim up to the surface that they have at least about 60 feet to go to. I feel like I could do that, but at the same time, I also feel like I would totally drown. As they fill the room with water, there's no going back, as now they pray to the Lord about getting to the surface. Pretty good idea, more so when there's a giant man-eating devilfish out there that is highly intelligent. So now begins the part of the movie where I always hold my breath to see if I survive. As they go through the hatch, I've already died. They let loose the extinguishers to make some noise so that they can get out of there. Literally following the extinguishers, I die for the second time. The shark then notices and starts going towards the group. And this is where my third death happens, because I'd meet my end from a panic attack. However, it attacks the extinguisher as planned, and as they breach the surface, Preacher gets grabbed by the shark. So, I know that you want to swim straight up, because that's like, I gotta get some air, but you might have wanted to swim at least a little diagonal towards a structure so you could get out. As the shark starts pulling him across the area, Preacher is able to stab the thing in the eye with his cross. Hell yeah, brother. The demon fish cannot handle what Preacher was cooking, and then lets him go as it loses an eye. Carter then grabs Preacher as he drags him to the burnt-out husk of the watchtower. That's a lot of blood, but they're able to stabilize him. So at this point, the pillars begin to collapse. Carter suspects that the sharks have been herding everybody around to flood the facility so that they could break through the steel fence on top, which is only steel, because titanium is on the bottom. They have to take out the demon fish in order to prevent it from escaping and making more demon fish. As the shark attempts to make its escape, Carter can't get a shot on it, so Susan does the smart thing and uses herself as bait. Which brings into question, which they thought I forgot, don't these things all have trackers on them? You found it originally, why couldn't you find it again? Susan then cuts herself and jumps in to attract the shark. This does catch the attention of the shark as it immediately turns around and bites her in half and then eats both portions. So not only do we not have the protein complex anymore, but the doctor who knows how to synthesize it just got turned into bite-sized pieces. Wonderful. Totally worth it. Although I suppose technically you could glean some information from the computers. So as Carter watches this, he goes to nope out because no thanks, and the shark goes in for an attack, but Carter's able to do a pretty sweet CGI roll over it that nobody else could accomplish, as then he climbs onto its back. Holding onto it, Preacher is able to get the shot on the shark, which spears Carter through the legs as well, which he could have just let go. Been like, okay, do a countdown, Preacher. When are you going to fire so I can roll off this thing? But as the shark then goes through the fence, it's able to get through, but Carter hangs on, which this thing rips out of his leg, permanently mangling that tissue and muscle. Not fun, I suppose, but as Preacher then blows the shark sky high, this ends the threat. As meaty chunks rain down, everyone is pretty jazzed as Carter comes back up to the surface. So now all you have to worry about is regular sharks showing up, since the water is massively chummed at this point. So as the next shift shows up, I'm pretty sure this was only 2 nights that they were there, if I remember correctly, so it should only be Sunday, unless they come back to work on Sunday instead of Monday? Oh well. At least they won't sink with the rest of the facility. And thus concludes Deep Blue Sea. There's a second movie of this, but no thanks. So first off, why would you put a shark tank in the ocean? It's stated that sharks cannot live in tanks on land, but if you've made a tank just made out of ocean water, could you not have accomplished the same thing on land then? Because they're also more intelligent. Second, they use nets rather than concrete walls. Why? Because this whole facility was set up with the great intention of using this protein and having no issues. Like, you knew the sharks were probably going to be more intelligent. Like, why did you not just build concrete walls? In theory, the protein may have worked to reactivate neuronal tissue by potentially taking the place of tau proteins that have been lost due to the progression of Alzheimer's disease. However, I still want you to know there are a few issues, such as the threads that have already been in the brain disrupting communication, and likely the reality more tau proteins are going to cut loose and create more threads, as well as like strangle all the neurons, with amyloid plaques kind of outright blocking axon to dendritic communication as well. So it appears as though one problem is solved, but there are still two other major issues. So was it worth it? If we have to do a 3-prong attack, I say absolutely. But anyhow, I want to hear what you guys think. All right, I'm not tripping, right? This was a stupid idea from the drop to be where they were. I mean, don't answer that. I can't be swayed. I already know it is. But if you enjoyed, please leave a like as it gets the video out there, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I'll drop my merch, Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and channel links to Roanoke Tales, where this week we talked about the Wolf Siege of Paris. That is out. I know I mentioned in the last 3 videos. It's out now. We'll do a new one here soon. I was supposed to do that, but I got sidetracked. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, huge thank you to our astronaut, 9+1021. Missed you the other day, so thank you, bro. Also to our astrophysicist, Desk Dancer. Thank you, bro. And next up, our scientist, Chad, the enjoyer of scientific explanations of B-grade horror movies, Dakota23, Florian, Lacune, Lucian Dragon, Octavia Serpentia, and the last final girl on the left. Thank you guys as well. And to the rest of my patrons, I appreciate you. Your help goes a long way towards keeping this channel running. You're a baller. All right, so that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.